Panini just dropped some huge news when it comes to getting sports cards overseas, and this was one of the biggest news. I mean, we're still very early into 2021, but when it comes to soccer cards, something that I've talked about, and I think something that a lot of people who have been into soccer cards have spoken about, this is how soccer cards are going to become bigger in the United States, or well, actually just bigger in general. So there was two essentially avenues that I thought, and that I've talked to many people, and this is kind of, I think, the consensus of most people who are collecting soccer, who are into soccer. They say that the two avenues essentially are going to be either that in the United States soccer becomes bigger, which I think it's hard to argue that's not happening. I think you're seeing Premier League and you're seeing Champions League and you're seeing big networks like Bleacher Report and CBS investing, and ESPN is now investing in soccer. So just from that standpoint, I think it's hard to argue that soccer isn't getting bigger in the United States. So that was one of the avenues, which is sort of happening. I think it's happening a little bit slower than maybe some people expected. I think it's going to take a while. It's going to take probably until the next World Cup if the U.S. makes it, which I think at this point, I think they will. I think that I was a little bit skeptical before going into this new season where a lot of players they were still kind of playing at smaller clubs, and then you saw you saw players like Weston McKennie, you saw Serginho Dest, you saw another player that I really like is Brendan Aronson. He is going over to Salzburg from a team in the United States, Philadelphia. And I think that team specifically has a pretty good trajectory when it comes to the overall amount of players that are playing overseas in these top leagues, and the how good they are, which is so. And then Pulisic obviously is one of the top stars in the American soccer world right now, playing at Chelsea. I would say Chelsea is probably the most Americanized English Premier League team. So from that standpoint, I definitely like that he's playing there. It's helping him over in England, but it's also kind of helping him in the United States become a bigger star, because Chelsea is a team that is frequently on television. Like, you can probably watch a majority of Chelsea games either in the Premier League or if they're in the Champions League, which the round of 16 or the round of 32 when all the teams are playing, it kind of depended on which games were going on which days. But like I said, Chelsea is on TV a lot, so that's one thing that I think for Pulisic is really good. Now, the news that is going to be the big news, basically, is that Panini announced that they're going to be selling and then I'll get into the second point of how soccer is going to get bigger after I talk about this news here. But so Panini announced that they are going to be selling the Prism product on their UK site, which is huge for UK collectors, because that's basically the other way that I suspected that soccer cards would become big, is if in Europe or or overseas these cards started to grow in popularity. And for them to grow in popularity, I think it has to be easier for people to get them. And I think that was one of the main issues from 2018, 2019, 2020. A lot of soccer fans and a lot of fans of just cards in general overseas, they would buy them, but they would have to spend, a ton on shipping, or a ton extra to get the cards even over there. And, that's why I think the stickers and, you see the Panini Adrenaline, like those types of products are very popular over there. And that's why I think a lot of the card collecting scene considers those maybe just as important as like a Prism card. So for like Mbappe, for example, like the Mbappe 2016 sticker, I think will eventually probably be the biggest Mbappe card of them all. And I know that I call the 2018 Prism Mbappe a rookie card, which technically it's not. He has he has that 2016 sticker, and then he has some 2017 cards, and I think there's also some cards from 2016 as well with the Panini Adrenaline. So this news is big. The other kind of big part of this is that Topps also had a set that was sold exclusively in the UK. So I think Topps update, I don't know if I'd have to check the exact checklist. I know that like a lot of the big stars like the Bo Bichette, the Luis Robert, the Yordan Alvarez, they all had the rookie card, like their official first rookie card in this set. So, and that was sold exclusively overseas. I've seen some of it come back over here, which I think it's a pretty interesting set, and I think actually one that may have some future value, and maybe one that you would want to look into. But both of these sets, I think, are huge steps in the right direction. And I think we saw that kind of with, I think some of the Topps Sapphire sets were also sold exclusively on the Topps UK site. And I saw some rumblings that Topps was canceling orders when the zip code / addresses weren't in were in the United States and weren't overseas. I heard some rumblings that they were potentially canceling some orders. I'm not 100% sure if they did do that or not, but there was a certain amount of sets that are only sold through the UK version of Panini's website. So all of this news is important for soccer fans because it is helping the soccer fan base overseas getting these cards. And Prism obviously is going to be one of the biggest sets, and I think this year is going to be a phenomenal set for the Premier League. I think there's going to be some good names in there. There's going to be I think Curtis Jones is going to be in there. He plays for Liverpool, and there's a couple other rookies that are going to be pretty big in this next Premier League set that I think will be important. And as we saw with the last Premier League set from last year, they did have the rookie card logo. And also kind of with this news, it's all kind of together, I would say, is they came out with the design for it, which typically the designs are all fairly similar when it comes to soccer, football, basketball. So we've seen, obviously, the football design. Now we have the soccer design. Sooner or later, in the next few weeks, we probably are going to have the basketball design, I would hope. But, I mean, who knows? That product may be pushed back, unfortunately, but we'll see. So, big news coming out of the soccer world. Panini is going to be selling this Premier League product exclusively on their UK site as well as on the United States site and hobby and kind of the way that they distribute this product just in general, but it will also be on the UK site exclusively. Some other big pieces of information for soccer fans, I think, are there's a couple different things. So I want to kind of do some quick hits here with this second part of the segment and see what people think. So the first one, Panini signed David Beckham to an exclusive deal for autographs, memorabilia, stuff like that. And I think that's a pretty big deal when it comes to signing such a huge star. And it also kind of goes back to what I was talking about before, where Americans becoming more interested in soccer. So David Beckham, if you didn't know this, is one of the owners of the Miami team that is in the MLS. So I think it's FC Miami. And they've been rumored to get all of these like crazy stars. Like I know Messi's been on the docket of players that they think they can get. They also think they can get like Neymar. I mean, with David Beckham being such a global superstar, also kind of an interesting fact, David Beckham, if you are interested in esports at all, he's signed to an esports organization who pays him to he's part of like the ownership group of this esport organization, but they like pay him. It's kind of a crazy thing, but so they signed him to an exclusive deal, which I think is a big deal, which could, like I said, leading back to my other point about Americans becoming more interested in soccer. I think that's a big deal because he is the owner of that Miami team. Also, many of you may have seen the collaboration between Mbappe and Lebron, which it's hard to even kind of overstate what a big deal I think that is because, you know, Mbappe is one of the biggest young stars in soccer. Obviously, if you listen to this podcast or you watch any of my content, you know that he's one of the players that I was buying a ton of last summer. And LeBron, obviously, being probably the biggest American star, I'd say, or a biggest star in American sports, next to maybe Trout. But at the same time, I think if you're comparing the two, LeBron's way bigger than Trout. But, you know, that's a conversation for another day. So LeBron and Mbappe are doing a collaboration, and this sort of leads into, I think, what's going to be a very important next few years for Mbappe and for soccer, because 2022 is when Mbappe's contract is up. So if we think that he's going to be sold, which the next point I'm going to get into is the new transfer values that just kind of came out. If we think that he's going to be sold, it's going to happen probably in the next year or so after this season. Maybe I know there's a transfer window going on right now in the Premier League, but I think there's also one in August. So there would be, and I'm not sure if they changed it based off of kind of the seasons being a little bit weird, but either way, there is a transfer market or transfer window then as well. So if you're buying Mbappe, I mean, I think that I know that I think Sunday League investors and NP sports cards were talking about some of the increases in some of the 2018 Mbappe stuff, which they were saying they weren't really sure. And I mean, I think it could be a few cards here and there that are selling maybe above average. I think that it's going to take probably the next. It's probably going to take them getting farther in the Champions League like last year to have more of an increase of that card. But so if you're going to see an Mbappe move, or at least sold, if he gets sold, which may or may not happen, if you're PSG, I guess you kind of look at it, you say, you might even look at it as like how the Warriors did when they signed Kevin Durant, and they said they were going all in for 2 to 3 years. They were going to pay the luxury tax. They were going to pay all the extra money to sign their superstars and then sign an extra star and then be able to re-sign people. They're going to pay that extra money because they know that if they are able to win a championship, that they're going to be able to generate X amount of revenue based off that championship, and they're willing to pay. Okay, so let's just say they're willing to make $400 million in revenue. I don't know if this is the number, but I'm making it up. But they're saying we could probably make $400 million worth of revenue, whether that's TV or that's memorabilia sales or championship stuff sales. They're willing to spend, or they're willing to make 400,000, but they're also, or 400 million, but they're willing to spend 200 million. I guess if that makes sense. And realistically, I think the salary cap is like 189, I think, in the NBA. So it probably is the number is probably even higher than that, but they look at the percentage that they're willing to pay, and they're saying, we know we're going to make X amount of revenue off of spending this money, so we're not going to, and to bring it back to soccer, we're not going to sell Mbappe for $100 million, or, actually I have the market value right now, it's $149 million, sorry, so $149 million for Mbappe right now, which he used to be the number one guy, with the number one transfer value in the world. It has changed a little bit, and we've seen some of these players go up in value a lot, which I will get into after this kind of example. So PSG is thinking that they would rather keep Mbappe, and they'll say that they'll rather keep him for the length of his contract and make, however much of revenue off of jersey sales, off of ticket sale, well, not really ticket sales anymore, but like off of TV revenue, off of all this stuff. They'd rather do that than sell Mbappe for $140, $150 million, if that makes sense. So with the new transfer values coming out, so we have, I'm going to just go in order. I have the information right in front of me. So it's Marcus Rashford at 160, 165, Erling Haaland at 152, Trent Alexander-Arnold at 151, Bruno Fernandes, which is a guy that I think he's gotten a pretty crazy rise. He's obviously been playing phenomenal for Manchester United, so that's why he's at 151, I think, which is very similar to Arnold. And then you have Mbappe, and then Jadon Sancho, Joao Felix, and I won't go any farther than that, but Joao Felix is 141, and Jadon Sancho is 148, and then Mbappe is 149. So you look at these players, and in my opinion, I think there's opportunities I think Bruno Fernandes would have been a pretty interesting opportunity. Like, I'm not going to toot my own horn here, but I did buy some of his cards. I bought, I think, 2 of his Topps Chrome refractors, and then I bought, I think, 1 or 2 of his Optic Hollows. So, that was obviously a pretty good move at the time, and I think that's kind of the opportunity with soccer there is going to be buying those types of players that are on the smaller team and then go to a bigger team. I think if Erling Haaland he had like 1 card, I think, at the time when he played for Salzburg before going over to Dortmund. That was an opportunity that I saw last December when I was doing my research. Same with Kai Havertz. He was on Leverkusen, I think is the name of is a German team. He was on that team, and I saw that he was the youngest player to score 30 goals. I forget what the exact tweet was, but I remember it was literally one tweet that I saw that was like, he scored this many goals in this amount of time. He's the first player to do it. And that's when I went and I bought some of his cards. And I have sold some of them, but I think I may have bought like 9 or 10 of his Optic cards, and they have shot up in value. So I think that's kind of the opportunity that there is with soccer. And when you're looking at transfer value, that's one of the things that I think is going to be important for sure with soccer when you are looking to buy those cards as well. So here's a story that I think for sports card collectors and investors that's pretty important, and when I talk or you listen to anybody else talk about buying Hall of Famers and reasons why they can go up in value, it's going to be the documentaries like we saw with the Jordan documentary, like we're seeing now with the Tiger Woods documentary. I think that another reason could be that for PSG, I know going back to soccer, I've been talking a lot about soccer on this episode, but PSG has a documentary out, and obviously, unfortunately, they lost in last year's Champions League final. But I think they had a documentary on Amazon that was they followed the team basically around in their run. And obviously, it got probably pretty weird with like Corona and all that type of stuff. But when it comes to specific players who are either Hall of Famers or potential Hall of Famers, or at least, well, actually, no, maybe not Hall of Famers or potential Hall of Famers, players who are not in the league anymore. I think you want to look for opportunities where they're going to be getting publicity, good publicity, obviously. I mean, bad publicity, I think, can affect cards. I haven't really looked into, like a player who had some sort of bad story come out after they either retired or before they got into the Hall of Fame or something like that. So I don't necessarily know if bad publicity is going to be an avenue for to look into for any of these types of players. But a story that came out is that Master P was talking about Allen Iverson, and he was saying that he wanted to make Allen Iverson the Michael Jordan of Reebok. And I think it's actually a pretty big deal. I think the notion that Allen Iverson, who, he didn't win a ring, he was one of the most electric players probably in the league when he was playing. Unfortunately, I think he only made it to that one finals against the Lakers and they got like destroyed, but he did have the step over of Ty Lue, which was a super funny moment, one of the most viral moments. So like that's just like another thing that I look at when I'm looking for specific types of cards or specific types of information that I think is important. You want to look for, I mean, it's the same with almost Vince Carter. Like I think Vince Carter may not have been one of the best players of all time, but he was a player that, like, when you look at specific moments in his career, they're some of the most important moments of the sport of basketball. The dunk contest at the old Warriors arena, like that was, I think, that was the last All-Star game, I think, at that arena, I'm pretty sure, or before they got the new one, but that's kind of beside the point. But so like, but his career essentially, he has moments like that. He has specific moments in his career that are going to be looked back on as some of the most important moments of the sport. I think it's the same with Allen Iverson. Allen Iverson has the clip, the practice clip, that's like, I don't know if that's the most famous basketball interview clip of all time, but it's got to be in the top 5, if not top 1 or 2. But it's one of the most but it's one of the most famous moments, I think, in the sport for interviews. And now if Master P is talking about making him sort of the face of Reebok, well, he pretty much already is the face of Reebok. I mean, he has the deal where he signed, rather than getting all the money up front, I think he signed a deal that was $800,000 per year. So it was sort of like the Bobby Bonilla baseball deal, where he's getting $800,000 every year, and then in 2030, when he turns 55, he's getting a payout. He's getting the payout of, I think it was $54 million once he turns 55 in 2030. So he's within 10 years of getting that payout, which, getting the $800,000 a year, I mean, granted, he was an NBA player. He also has that funny interview where someone was talking about going to like a Chili's or an Applebee's or something, and the bill was like there was like a couple thousand, I think it was like $10,000 or $40,000, but it's one of those moments that are pretty wild. And for sports card people, I think that's important, because if Master, and now granted, I think also actions are going to speak louder than words in this scenario like this, because if they do, and he does become one of these big star, which he's already a big star, in terms of the biggest stars in the league, he's probably in the top 25. He's definitely not the most, definitely not a top 25 player of all time, but like in terms of, probably like face like recognition and people knowing who he is, he's probably at least in the top 30, I would say. I mean, because there are tons of players who are great but just aren't necessarily superstars or wannabe stars, and he was definitely somebody who did. So because he has, like I said, he has the practice, like that kind of clip. So I think seeing something like that for people who are into sports cards is important, and I think is something that you should look into. Now, also, the Allen Iverson is part of one of the most iconic sets of all time, which is the 96 Topps, which is actually the first Topps Chrome set from 96. Also, Kobe's rookie year, the Kobe rookie set. So if you are getting into, I don't know if anybody does 1996 Topps basketball breaks, but if you're getting into that break, just know that, like, that set is loaded. It's got Steve Nash, it's got Kobe, obviously, it's got Ray Allen, it's got Allen Iverson, it's got like some pretty big names in that set. And then with it being the first Topps Chrome set, I think that's also a pretty big deal when it comes to just overall historic sets of all time, whether it's basketball or baseball or whatever. But I think if you are looking into sports cards, you have to kind of keep an eye out for stories like this, because I think they are more important than just the story itself. I think if you're a sports card collector or an investor, these are the type of stories that you need to have on your radar when you are doing any type of collecting. Well, more investing rather than collecting, because if you're collecting Iverson, obviously you probably don't care about the price, but if you're investing in him, these are the types of stories that are going to probably help his card prices and increase his card prices in the future. Something that I think a lot about is how to make some of the hobby companies better, but also kind of keep the processes and keep them the way that they are. And I think Slabstox put out a very interesting post on Instagram about what PSA could do in order to catch up on what they're doing, basically. And I saw some pretty interesting responses, but then I also have a theory that I think that I'm piecing together that I think would be a good idea. So one of the interesting responses I actually saw was just shut down any new cards and catch up for a month, which I think would be a good idea. I think that it would be kind of tough to... I think if they were to do that, here's what I think what would have to happen. It would have to be any new incoming packages, they would have to figure out how to grade those, and catching up with... I don't even know if that really means, like, all the cards are getting graded, or, you know, if half the cards are getting graded, but I do think that maybe shutting down and just getting all the cards caught up would be a decent solution, but it doesn't really... The only problem with that is that, like, the amount of people who are sending in the cards, this is maybe the main issue that they are having, is that the amount of people who are sending in the cards are overtaking sort of how many cards they can grade in a certain year. Like, the orders are much higher than the amount of cards that they physically can get. And I don't think that necessarily... One of the things that I think I saw was people saying that they should hire more people, and I just don't necessarily know if hiring more people is going to be the fix or the solution that they're looking for. I think eventually they will have to, but I don't think it's the... Hiring more people to catch up on the orders that they have, I don't think is going to be the solution, because you're going to bring new people in. It's going to mess up. It's going to mess up some of the processes maybe that they have. Maybe the grading itself gets changed in a way that's not good for the customer, maybe not good for the company. So I think slowly hiring new people, like bringing 1 or 2 people on, is going to be an important step in getting more cards graded. Because if you're PSA, you obviously want to grade as many cards as you can, because that's revenue that you're getting in. That's revenue that you're generating, and all you have to do is, like, I don't know, it seems fairly simple to grade a card, but I'm sure there's so many different steps that have to go into each individual card being graded that it's probably not as easy as I think it is. But I think bringing on 1 to 2 people per month is probably a good solution long term, not obviously short term, because bringing on 1 to 2 people a month isn't going to help the backup that they have. And the shutting down, I think that is a solution, but I think at this point now that it's a private company, I think that's a more realistic option, where when they were a publicly traded company, when Collectors Universe was on the stock exchange, that probably wasn't an option, because you can't just say we're not going to generate any revenue for a month, or we're not going to generate any new revenue, because they're going to generate the revenue from the cards that they have, depending on how much they're charging and stuff like that. But they're not going to go through a month of not generating any revenue, and also it's going to stop people from sending in, and it's going to load up. It's going to, and again, it's going to be the same issue that they had, because once they say that they're accepting new submissions, a ton of new orders are going to come in. At least this is, I'm not 100% sure. This is me speculating a little bit, but I do think that people are still going to want to send stuff in at the same rate. They may, and if they don't have, and they have a month where they're not sending anything in, that's just a month of their cards sitting and not being graded. So that's kind of where I think it's a possibility, but I think there are some challenges. Now, I think a solution for PSA, it's going to be unfortunate, but I've always said this in the past. I think they're going to continue to increase prices, and I think they need to probably figure out a way to either split up the amount of cards that they're getting. So I think this is one of my solutions that I think could be a possibility. So I think they should be instead of bulking they should have because they have, like I talked about in a previous episode, probably the last one, where they have the different levels of years for when the cards, what the cards are being categorized as. They need to have, each of those categories need to have subcategories potentially, and like I said, there's probably more that would need to be worked out with this idea, but like for any modern or ultra modern stuff, they need to rank like the top rank the top cards from that set. And see, here's one of the other problems with this is I think that if they were to say you're going to be charged more for getting a non-rookie card graded, it almost takes away an option for a collector who just wants to get a card graded, so that way it's in a slab and it's graded, even if it's not a rookie card. But I do think that they have to prioritize making money, I think. But they also have to prioritize what's going to be best for the company and then what's going to be best for the collector. And I think they're kind of two different things. And I don't know if there's a way that they can figure out how to do all this stuff and put it all together, to be completely honest. Like, I think that going forward, we're going to see it. Each of the decisions is going to skew in one direction. Like, they're not going to make a decision that's going to be great for collectors and it's going to be great for the company. It's probably either going to be great for the company or it's going to be great for collectors, which I think it's probably going to be skew more towards the company itself. Like, that would include raising prices. That would include making it, taking away maybe some of the options that they have. And one of the other options was to take out group submissions, which I think would be it was something that actually, interesting enough, the other day, the group submission option on the PSA website went missing. Now, I woke up and saw on Twitter that everybody was freaking out because it was gone. Turns out it was just a glitch in the system and it's back up now, so it's really not an issue. But, that would have changed everything, I think, of the industry of group submissions, because people run businesses that are just solely grading. Like, so if they take out these group submissions, or in group submissions, which is more or less the value submission at least, which, because you could still do group submissions, but you'd have to just charge more, and they would take out the value option, which I think it's the 45-day. I'm not 100% sure if they have like a 100-day one, but they have for group submissions, because it used to only be like $10 to $12 per card, if we remember that, like just a year ago. So grading has become so popular that there has to be something that has to change probably with the company, but it's going to be tough to really see where I think that change could come from. And I think it's going to skew more towards the company, benefiting the company rather than the collector, because it's a company, it's a for-profit company. That's just the reality of it. It's the same with Panini and Topps charging whatever they want to charge for these hobby boxes or boxes on their websites. It's a company that they're trying to make money. So like, they want to cater towards collectors and investors, but they also need to make money. So they're looking at it and saying, well, we know that someone will spend X amount on a box, so we're just going to charge that much for a box, and that's just how it goes. Like, I think that's definitely something that the companies definitely are cognizant of, and something that I think will go more into the future. So the thing that I was talking about with the modern and ultra modern stuff is ranking the certain rookie cards, like putting Topps Flagship, Bowman Chrome, Prism, maybe even Optic into one category and saying we're charging X for these products, and then breaking it up where you say Donruss and Hoops, and maybe even say I don't know exactly compared to basketball, from basketball to baseball, I'd say you're probably looking at like a Topps Finest maybe for baseball, or a Heritage probably would be in that same category with the Donruss and the Donruss and Hoops. So I think that could be an option, but definitely something that I'm going to be looking into a little bit more and trying to figure out, because like I said, with these hobby companies, I'm always trying to figure out a way to make things better for both sides, just because that's kind of the content that I try and create. I don't necessarily think I skew one way or the other. Maybe I do skew more towards the marketing and company side than I do collector side, but I just think that with that, I think it's more realistic that a company is going to want to try to make money rather than, not make money, I guess, if that makes sense. So I want to thank you all for listening or watching to this episode. Make sure you go follow on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Reddit, all those places. If you like the episode, make sure you go and leave a review on iTunes. I would really appreciate it. Or screenshot it and post on your Instagram. I also would really appreciate that. Or Twitter or wherever. Thank you all for listening. I'll see you in the next episode.